The explosion ripped through the hull of the reconnaissance transport like a punch through wet paper. The internal lights flickered, then died, and all that remained was the rapid, staccato flashing of emergency strobes. Xavier Stenner didn't remember the impact. One moment he was trying to reroute power through the auxiliary core. The next he was staring up at the ceiling of the infirmary aboard the Rishtala medical frigate. His entire left side numb and something warm pooling under his back. A high-pitched mechanical chime echoed above him, then a blur of bright green skin passed across his vision. The alien doctor's voice was sharp, fast, and entirely incomprehensible. "Where?" Xavier groaned, his throat dry and muscles locking as he tried to sit up. A jolt of pain shot through his abdomen. The alien, roughly humanoid with elongated limbs and a smooth, iridescent scalp, gently pushed him back down. "Do not move," it said in heavily accented English. "You are gravely wounded. Remain still." "What happened?" he coughed, tasting blood. "My ship." "You were retrieved from the wreckage. You should not be alive. No others survived." The alien's tone was flat, clinical. Xavier blinked against the strobing lights. A piece of metal the size of a spatula had embedded itself deep into his side. He could feel the pull of it when he inhaled, and the pain was intensifying with every second. His left leg felt like it had been snapped in two. "Is it bad?" Xavier asked, already knowing the answer. The alien looked down at a translucent tablet, then turned to the others behind it. There were 3 more doctors. He could hear them arguing in their native tongue, a guttural language punctuated by trills and clicks. "Your injuries," the lead doctor said, "are beyond correction. The internal bleeding is extensive. The femoral artery is partially severed. Your pelvic bone is shattered. We cannot repair this, not in time." Xavier's breathing quickened. "So that's it. You're just giving up. You will be sedated," the doctor replied. "You will lose consciousness within minutes. You will not experience pain." "No." Xavier clenched his teeth, then rolled to his side despite the agony. "No sedation, not until I try something. You do not understand the severity of your condition." "I understand enough." "Now get me a needle and thread." The alien paused. "Excuse me." "Needle, thread, any kind you've got, and gauze, tape if you have it." Xavier's voice was shaking, but there was steel beneath it. "That is not a viable treatment." "I didn't ask for a lecture." "I asked for thread." The alien hesitated. "Now," Xavier barked. Against its better judgment, the doctor relayed the request. Moments later, a sterile pack was brought to him, heavy-duty filament not unlike fishing line and a curved suture needle. The kind used on alien carapaces, not human flesh. It would have to do. Xavier didn't waste time. He ripped open his flight suit to expose the wound. Blood gushed from the gash in his side. The metal shard had to come out. He grabbed a pair of forceps from a tray beside him, bit down on a rubber mouthpiece someone had shoved in his jaw, and yanked. The shard slid free with a wet, sucking sound. He screamed through clenched teeth, then immediately pressed gauze into the hole. The alien doctors watched in horrified fascination. "This is madness," one whispered. Xavier didn't respond. Sweat poured down his face. His vision blurred, but his hands were steady. He threaded the needle, then began stitching. Each pass of the needle was a fresh wave of agony. He dug it into torn muscle and skin, pulling tight over and over. Blood ran like a river down his side, soaking the table. The lead doctor leaned closer. "You will pass out before you finish." "I might," Xavier grunted, "but I'll still have tried." He didn't pass out. It took 15 minutes to close the wound. By the end, his entire body trembled and he could barely hold the needle. When he finished, he collapsed back onto the table, breathing shallow and fast. "Get me Roman 4 fluids," he croaked, "and put a tourniquet on my leg." "I think the bone's broken." The alien did as asked, for once not arguing. Xavier lay still as the cold fluid began to drip into his veins. His body had gone into shock and he knew he needed real surgery soon, but the bleeding had stopped. He'd bought himself time. 2 hours later, Xavier was in a proper surgical bay. The alien doctors, to their credit, worked quickly now that the bleeding was controlled. They scanned his pelvis, confirming multiple fractures and the severed artery. They clamped and repaired the vessel, then began internal repairs. He was under anesthesia before they reached the leg. When he woke up, it was 3 days later. His entire lower body was immobilized. A frame held his hip and femur in position. He couldn't move, and every breath sent a dull throb through his side. The lead alien doctor stood beside him, arms folded behind its back. "You survived." "Yeah," Xavier rasped. "People do that sometimes." The alien stared at him. "We did not believe it was possible. I noticed. We study over 300 oxygen-based species. None have demonstrated that level of pain tolerance." "It wasn't about pain tolerance," Xavier said. "It was about not dying." The alien looked down at the suture work. "Your stitching was crude, inexact, still worked." "Yes, it did." For a moment, neither said anything. Finally, the alien added, "We would like to study your recovery, your biology." "Fine," Xavier said. "Just make sure you don't botch the next surgery." "There will be no need. Your internal injuries are healing. The bone fractures will require time." "You will not walk for at least 2 months." "Sounds about right," Xavier said. Over the next week, Xavier remained in the medbay. The alien staff, once hands-off and skeptical, began to take notes on everything he did: how he ate, how he asked for painkillers, how he rolled over to ease pressure on his back. He asked for a notepad and pen. They brought him a tablet instead. He used it to write down his own notes, observations, ideas, ways to improve the ship's emergency systems so this didn't happen again. Recovery was slow. By the 2nd week, he was sitting up. By the 3rd, he was doing basic stretches. The doctors were baffled by his resilience. "You were clinically dead for 30 seconds, one said. "Guess I came back. Your species is unnerving. Tell me something new." At 4 weeks, he began physical therapy with the help of an exoskeletal brace. The alien therapist, a short, squat creature named Varn, pushed him harder than he liked. "Again," Varn grunted. Xavier grimaced. "I just did 10 reps. "Do 10 more." He did. The pain was constant, not sharp anymore, just dull and relentless. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why he'd lived when everyone else on his ship hadn't. The wreck hadn't been sabotage. It was a malfunction of the artificial gravity dampeners. A rare but deadly flaw, one he should have caught. He didn't cry. But he stopped writing for a while. The alien doctors noticed. They didn't ask. At 6 weeks, he took 6 steps without the brace. Each one felt like walking on fire. He collapsed on the 7th. Varn helped him up. "Again," Varn said. Xavier shook his head. "Tomorrow." "Fine." By the 9th week, he was walking unassisted, slowly, with a limp. The lead doctor approached him in the corridor. "We have submitted a report to the Galactic Medical Assembly. Your actions have been noted. I'm not interested in medals. We didn't offer any." Xavier raised an eyebrow. The alien added, "But we did recommend that human emergency protocols be studied more closely. Your species may have useful instincts." "Instincts?" Xavier laughed. "That wasn't instinct, that was desperation. Desperation can be instructive." He didn't argue. By the 12th week, he was cleared to travel. A new transport waited for him at the dock. The ship wasn't flashy, but it was sturdy. Human-built. He trusted it. As he stepped aboard, the lead medical officer joined him. "We still do not fully understand why you requested a needle and thread." "I didn't want to die with my hands in my pockets." The alien tilted its head. "A strange idiom. You'll get used to us." "I'm not sure we will." Xavier smiled faintly. "Good." He sealed the hatch behind him. The engines hummed to life. He was going home. The corridor outside the docking bay was loud in that quiet, clinical way only space stations managed: footsteps over polished alloy, murmurs in 20 languages, the soft hum of gravity stabilizers buried in the walls. Xavier leaned against the rail, left leg stiff but holding. His duffel hung from one shoulder, light despite everything packed inside. Arishtala orderly approached, his gait a series of short, calculated steps. He held out a small black case. This was recovered from your shuttle. It passed quarantine. Xavier took the case and flipped it open. Inside, nestled between foam panels, was his grandfather's analog wristwatch, battered, still ticking. He slipped it on. Appreciate it. The orderly gave a shallow bow and left. No small talk, no well wishes. That was fine. He hadn't taken more than 5 steps toward the transport when a new figure intercepted him short, with a flattened snout and wide, expressive eyes that blinked in alternating lids. The creature wore a diplomatic sash and carried a tablet nearly its size. "You are Commander Stenner," it chirped, voice papery. "Was," Xavier said. "Now I'm just trying to get back to Earth without another hull breach. I am Liaison Secret of the Culinary Outreach Branch. You have been requested to debrief with the Interspecies Medical Ethics Committee before departure. The inquiry is brief. 10 minutes. 15, perhaps. I'm not a fan of committees. Noted, your transport will wait. Come." Secret turned without confirming his compliance, assuming it. Xavier followed. They passed through a gate marked with a rotating glyph that translated roughly to Bio-Sovereign Assembly. Inside was a chamber shaped like a flattened dome, its walls layered in translucent panels that shifted color as they walked. Around a circular table sat 5 aliens, none of whom Xavier recognized. All wore different variations of medical insignia. Secret took a small podium. "The human has arrived." A tall, willowy being with skin like molten silver gestured for Xavier to sit. "We appreciate your presence. We have questions regarding your autonomous surgical response during the shuttle incident." Xavier eased into the chair and crossed his arms. "You mean the part where I stitched myself up with alien thread while bleeding out?" There was a pause. A pale blue creature with a crown of sensory nodules clicked pensively. "Correct. We find the decision aberrant and anomalous. Your physiology should have entered terminal shock." "I guess it didn't. This is not a sufficient explanation." Xavier leaned forward. "You want a clinical answer? Fine." "The pain didn't matter. What mattered was stopping the bleeding. I knew I wouldn't make it if I waited. That's it." The silver-skinned one inclined its head. "But you lacked sterilization equipment, anesthesia, imaging, yet you proceeded?" "I've seen worse done with less," Xavier said. "Not everything needs a full surgical theater. Sometimes you work with what you've got." The creature with nodules tapped its claw against the table. "Are such interventions common among your people?" "No, they're not common. But we're not strangers to improvising when everything's gone sideways." The rounder alien with a mouth that opened vertically rasped, "Would you recommend this method for others?" "What, impaling yourself on debris and sewing it shut with fishing line?" "No. I'd recommend not crashing in the first place." Brief silence followed. Then a smaller being, almost entirely translucent, emitted a low-frequency hum. "We've observed that your species often engages in self-salvaging behaviors even when expertise is absent." "Is this a cultural imperative?" Xavier blinked. "We don't wait around to be rescued. That's not a culture thing. It's survival. If it hurts, fix it. If it breaks, patch it. If you're dying, maybe don't." The silver one leaned back. "We are updating our emergency response protocols with human contingencies. Your case will be referenced." "I'm not a model patient," Xavier said. "I'm just stubborn." "That has been noted as a trait." The meeting ended without ceremony, no handshakes, no applause. Secret escorted him back through the corridor, silent all the way. At the docking bay, the transport still waited, entrance ramp down. 2 crew members stood at the hatch, an older Terran engineer and a broad-shouldered alien with plum-colored scales. Both watched him with open curiosity. Inside, the transport smelled like compressed air and dried metal, comforting in a way only space veterans understood. He dropped his bag into a bunk and settled into a crash seat. The engineer gave a nod from across the cabin. "Didn't think you'd be walking on your own after what I heard," she said. "Neither did the doctors. Guess that's why they're not betting types." The transport lifted off without fanfare. Outside the viewport, the Rishtala station rotated slowly, its hull glowing with ambient shield energy. Xavier watched it shrink into the distance, arms folded over his chest. 3 days later, the ship docked at a mid-range refueling port in the Darson Belt. Xavier stayed aboard, but the alien crew rotated through maintenance checks and cargo inspections. One afternoon, he stepped into the galley for a meal and found the plum-scaled crew member examining a flex tablet, his eyes darting between images. "You're the one from the medical report," the alien said, not looking up. "Depends what the report says. You sutured your own thoracic laceration with carapace thread. That's the version making the rounds, yeah." The alien turned the tablet toward him. "They recorded it, training footage, used for multi-species trauma simulations. You're famous among the medical cadets now." Xavier stared at the screen a moment. "Great, I always wanted to be a cautionary tale." The alien clicked his jaw. "They aren't mocking you. They're studying you. Funny what passes for science these days." "I was combat medtech during the Plarkin skirmishes," the alien said. "We lost dozens to internal bleeds because they refused to operate on themselves." Xavier grabbed a ration bar from the dispenser. "Most people don't think straight when they're dying. Most don't think at all. You did." He sat down at the table. The chair creaked under his weight. "I didn't want my mom to get a call saying they found my body floating in an escape pod." The alien tilted his head. "You acted for emotional reasons. Isn't that what everyone does? Even when they say it's logic, it's usually just fear in a lab coat." The alien considered that, then returned to his tablet. Later that evening, the ship encountered a gravitic anomaly while passing through a narrow corridor between asteroid clusters. The ship jolted, lights dimming, emergency systems kicking in. Xavier was thrown against the corridor wall, hip flaring in protest. A systems alert sounded, auxiliary dampeners offline. He limped to the engineering bay where the engineer was already buried elbow-deep in a control panel. "Don't tell me this is déjà vu," Xavier said. "Secondary couplings cracked," she said. "We've got about 40 minutes of stability before the inertial compensators fail." Xavier grabbed a toolkit from the wall. "You need someone to run diagnostics on the power relays. You qualified?" "No, but I'm stubborn." They worked in tandem, fingers flying over circuits and fuses. The alien engineer joined them, offering schematics and alternative reroute options. Sweat pooled in the small of Xavier's back. His leg ached, but he didn't stop. 35 minutes later, the ship stabilized. Lights returned to full power. The anomaly faded behind them like a bad dream. Back in the galley, they shared electrolyte pouches and silence. The engineer gave him a glance. "You ever think about going back into command?" "Nope. You're good under pressure. I'm tired of bleeding for it." The alien engineer let out a low, resonant hum. "You humans are unpredictable. Unpredictability underrated." They didn't press him further. He appreciated that. 2 days after the anomaly, they arrived at a Terran medical station orbiting Europa. Xavier limped down the ramp, duffel slung over his shoulder, watch ticking faintly under his sleeve. A nurse with military insignia scanned his ID chip and pointed him toward the intake wing. As he passed through the doors, a young intern at the desk did a double take. "You're the guy." The one with the Xavier held up a hand. "If you're about to say needle and thread, I'm walking back into space." The intern shut his mouth. Inside the examination room, a human doctor reviewed his file, brows climbing. "Looks like you recovered faster than predicted." "I had help," Xavier said, "and a lot of spite," the doctor laughed. "That works better than half the meds we've got." He submitted to a battery of scans, tests, and reflex evaluations. When it was over, the doctor handed him a data slate. "You're cleared for civilian duty, but you'll need to keep that leg monitored. No high-impact activity for 6 months." Xavier nodded. "I'll stick to light heroism." He stepped outside into the artificial daylight of the station's main corridor. Civilians brushed past in both directions. No one recognized him. No one stared. For the first time in weeks, he felt anonymous. He liked it. The lights in the Europa Medical Station's rehabilitation wing were dimmed to simulate late evening, though the station's orbit never allowed for anything resembling a true sunset. Xavier Stenner sat in a shallow recliner by the observation window, his leg elevated on a padded brace. A thermal pad pulsed under his calf, quiet and steady. He rotated his ankles slowly, counting out each motion in his head, jaw tight from effort. Across the room, a tall, amphibious alien with drooping eye ridges and mottled purple skin adjusted the settings on a diagnostic monitor. Its long fingers glided over the interface in practiced arcs before it turned toward him, blinking alternately in each eye. "You are overdue for your muscle elasticity scan," it said, voice gravelly but calm. "I was told I could skip it if I passed the treadmill loop yesterday," Xavier said, not looking up. "You passed the loop," the alien agreed, "but your left tibialis muscle is still 27% under baseline. Skipping will delay your discharge. You people really know how to dangle a carrot. We do not administer root vegetables." Xavier exhaled slowly and sat up straighter. "Fine. Let's get it over with." The alien approached with a small, rectangular scanner and kneeled beside him. It pressed the device to the side of his shin, and a soft blue light pulsed against the skin. "You are healing faster than projections," it said. "Seems to be a theme lately." The alien paused, then added, "You altered your own blood pH during the shuttle incident, voluntarily," he nodded. "Hyperventilation, not exactly textbook, but it bought me time. This is not typically effective." "It usually isn't," he said. "But I didn't have better options." The scanner beeped and the alien stood. "The fibers are regaining flexibility, still fragile. I'm not planning to run a marathon. Good, you would collapse before the halfway marker." Xavier gave a dry laugh, then leaned back again. "You got a name," the alien tilted its head. "Designation is Tal Vun. I oversee xenophysiological adaptation studies." "That's a mouthful. You may call me Tal." "All right, Tal," he said. "How many humans have come through this wing?" "4, including you." 2 were injured in off-world mining operations. 1 suffered radiation exposure while attempting unauthorized repairs on a derelict freighter. "Let me guess, he used duct tape and hope." "He used chewing gum and a carbon filament. He survived." Xavier gave a low whistle. "We're a clever species." "Or stupid, sometimes both. Your species has demonstrated a high tolerance for risk and for improvisation." "Yeah," he muttered, "we get that a lot." Tal moved to the wall console and began compiling the scan data. "Your case has been assigned to the Interspecies Procedural Committee for review." "I've had enough committees to last a lifetime. They are not punitive. There is growing interest in your surgical improvisation." He rubbed his temple. "It wasn't genius, it was just obvious. You have a hole, you close it. You have bleeding, you stop it. If you can't see inside, you feel your way through. No anesthetic. Didn't have any. Most beings would faint from the pain. They probably should. But fainting doesn't fix anything." Tal was silent for a moment, then stepped away from the console and approached a small wall compartment. It unlocked with a hiss, revealing a sealed case. He lifted it carefully and brought it over. "What's that?" "Human field kit. One of the Terran engineers left it during a joint training cycle. I requested it be archived for study." Xavier sat forward as Tal opened it. Inside were a handful of items: gauze, antiseptic gel, pressure bandages, a sewing kit, and a tiny, battered multi-tool. "That's not standard military issue," Xavier said, reaching out. "That's from civilian med packs." "Correct. We analyzed the stitching thread. It matches the material you requested aboard the Rishtala frigate." He picked up the needle from its foam slot and turned it in his fingers. It was slightly curved, dulled at the tip from use. "This one's been through a few jackets." "Why did you not request a dermal regenerator?" Tal asked. "Because I didn't think they'd give me one." "Did you consider asking?" "I considered not bleeding to death first." Tal tapped his claw lightly on the edge of the case. "Your judgment was unorthodox but effective. I'm not flattered." "I'm just alive." That distinction is not always meaningful to other species. Xavier placed the needle back into the kit and closed the lid. You ever had to treat yourself, Tall? No. We are conditioned to seek assistance immediately. Must be nice. Sometimes it creates dependency. He studied the alien for a moment. You think that's what happened with your other human patients? One died before intervention was possible. The others recovered with intensive care. Xavier nodded slowly. You catalog everything? Yes. Then add this, he said, leaning forward. The first thing you need in an emergency isn't a team, it's a decision. You make the wrong one, you die. You make the right one, you might still die. But at least it's your call. Tall's eye ridges lowered slightly. That is a heavy burden. Welcome to being human. A soft chime interrupted them. The wall display lit up with a notification. Discharge clearance confirmed, civilian status reinstated. Tall looked at him. You are permitted to leave at your discretion. No follow-ups, not unless complications arise. Xavier stood slowly, testing his weight. The brace was gone, only a compression wrap remained. He pulled his jacket from the back of the chair and slung it over his shoulder. You got somewhere to go now? Tall asked. Back home. Not sure I'll stay long. The station will retain your file for future reference. Of course it will. He stepped into the corridor, the artificial lighting casting long shadows down the polished floor. As he passed the intake desk, the same intern from his first day waved awkwardly. Xavier gave a nod and kept walking. The transport lobby was quiet, just a few travelers waiting by the gates. He approached the kiosk and keyed in his identifier. A voice behind him spoke before he could complete the check-in. You stitched your own side up with thread from a carapace kit. Xavier turned. The speaker was short, with segmented arms and eyes that blinked sideways. It wore an academic badge, the kind associated with research stations. I read the report, it continued. We're constructing a comparative study. Would you be willing to sit for a procedural interview on improvisational trauma response? He shook his head. No lectures, no interviews. I'm not teaching a class, but the insight could find someone who wants to be a case study. The researcher hesitated, then stepped back with a nod. Xavier returned to the kiosk and completed his check-in. The system confirmed a window seat on the outbound shuttle. As he boarded, he passed a quiet row of observation chairs where another human sat, youthfully awkward and clearly new to deep space travel. The kid glanced up, eyes wide. You're the guy from the Rishtala logs, he said. The one with the Xavier cut him off. Yeah. That's me. The younger man blinked. Was it really that bad? It was worse. He moved past without further comment and found his seat. The shuttle hummed gently as it powered up. Outside the viewport, Europa rotated slowly, ice reflecting against Jupiter's glow. He fastened his harness, leaned back, and closed his eyes. No alarms, no blood, no needles, just silence. And that finally was enough.